Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is my response to the first discussion question, which asks why the United States chose to pursue an economic relationship with the Middle East instead of asserting its political and military control over that region. Now, when you first look at that question, the obvious answer seems to be oil. It's all about oil. The Middle East is the world's largest producer of oil, and the United States seems to be the largest consumer. But the question is, or the answer is more complicated than that. And based on the reading from this week and my own knowledge of the subject, to begin to answer that question, I think that you have to look at the state of American foreign policy during the second half of the 20th century, when the United States really became involved in the Middle East and began to develop an interest in that in that region. You have to remember that prior to the 20th century, the United States was largely an isolationist nation, meaning that the United States focused on its own problems and its own issues, and it let the rest of the world figure out its own problems. And that obviously changed starting with World War I, and especially after the end of World War II, when the United States was pushed to the forefront of the international political arena, and it became one of the world's superpowers, the other one being the Soviet Union. And obviously the Cold War and the U.S.'s relationship with the Soviet Union were at the forefront of American foreign policy during much of the second half of the 20th century. I remember reading in the National Security Council report of, I believe it was 1952, and this document was written by the National Security Council under President Eisenhower. And while this document focused largely upon U.S. relations with the Soviet Union, the document stressed the importance of the United States developing a relationship with what they referred to as the unaligned areas of the world. Now, unaligned areas of the world were what some would refer to as nations that aren't as modernized as much of the Western world, and the Middle East would have been considered an unaligned area. And the United States was worried that the Soviet Union was going to take control of the Middle East and use its resources such as oil and its manpower to strengthen its regime and continue to spread communism throughout the world. So I believe that the United States considered it important to its national security to develop a relationship with the Middle East. Now, one of the reasons why they chose to pursue an economic relationship rather than asserting military control, which some argue would have been easier, I believe that that goes back to the idea of American exceptionalism. And Jacob alludes to that concept in his book. Even though he doesn't refer to it specifically, he talks about how Americans, especially academics, missionaries, tourists, other people who were primarily the United States' main source of experts on the Middle East prior to the 20th century, these people tended to, and the United States as a whole, tended to hold to the idea that the United States, its values and its way of living its society as a whole was better than the rest of the world. And so if what was good for the United States was, you know, obviously would have been good for the rest of the world. So I think that idea of American exceptionalism, the idea that the United States had the responsibility to make the rest of the world more westernized, more like it, again, to protect its national security interests. I believe that that played a large role in the U.S.'s decision to pursue an economic relationship with the Middle East. And of course, there's the whole idea of oil, especially towards the middle of the 20th century, during World War II, the United States had an increasing need for oil for its basic functioning. That obviously played a large role. But as I stated earlier, I believe that's only one part of the puzzle. So I see that I'm at 6 minutes, so I will end that there. See y'all next week.